Book nibbles. Big ideas, small bites. When Dorothy Crawford wrote Deadly Companions, How Microbes Shaped Our History, she invited readers to look at human history from an entirely different perspective. Not from the viewpoint of kings and empires, but through the microscopic world of bacteria and viruses that have accompanied us for millennia. The central theme is disarmingly simple. Humans have never lived alone on this planet. We are forever in the company of microbes, some harmless, some beneficial, and some deadly. These organisms are not just background players, they are active agents that have shaped our societies, our migrations, our wars, and even our genetic makeup. To understand the story of humanity is to also understand the story of the microbes that have traveled with us, often invisibly, yet always profoundly influential. Crawford begins with the idea that microbes are the original inhabitants of Earth, long predating us by billions of years. Life began in microbial form, and for most of Earth's history, microbes had the planet to themselves. Their adaptability, their ability to colonize every imaginable niche, from boiling hot vents at the bottom of the sea to the icy peaks of mountains, demonstrates their resilience. When humans eventually arrived, it was inevitable that we would join their ecosystem rather than displace it. What we call disease is often simply the byproduct of microbes exploiting opportunities in us, just as they exploit every other ecological opportunity. Microbes don't have motives, they follow the laws of survival and replication. But their interactions with us have been profound, and Crawford frames much of the book around how these interactions altered history. She reminds us that most microbes are not our enemies. The majority live in harmony with us, forming part of our microbiome. Our digestive systems, our skin, even our mouths are teeming with microbes that play essential roles in breaking down food, protecting us from harmful invaders, and training our immune systems. In fact, our survival depends on them. Yet it is the small minority that cause disease, the pathogens that have left such deep marks on our past. Crawford makes the striking point that these disease-causing microbes evolved alongside us, shaping us as much as we shaped them. Over centuries, microbes have become our deadly companions, simultaneously destructive and intimate. The story then turns historical. Crawford takes the reader on a tour of how diseases have emerged, spread, and altered civilizations. One of her earliest examples is the transition from hunter-gatherer life to settled agricultural communities. In small bands of foragers, microbes had limited chances to thrive because groups were too dispersed and too small to sustain continuous transmission. Epidemics burn out quickly when populations are tiny. But with the advent of farming, people began to live in larger, denser communities. They domesticated animals, which brought new microbes into close contact with humans. Cows, pigs, and chickens harbored viruses and bacteria that could leap into humans. This new proximity created fertile ground for diseases like smallpox, influenza, and measles. The first cities became incubators for pathogens, which circulated endlessly among their crowded populations. In this way, the rise of civilization itself created the ecological conditions for epidemic disease. Crawford emphasizes how zoonotic diseases, those jumping from animals to humans, have been the great drivers of epidemics. Smallpox, for example, is thought to have originated from a cowpox-like virus, adapted over time to infect humans exclusively. Measles likely evolved from a cattle virus related to rinderpest. Influenza viruses, notoriously adaptable, frequently move between birds, pigs, and humans, producing new strains capable of sparking pandemics. By telling these evolutionary stories, Crawford underlines that human health has always been entangled with our animal companions. Domesticating animals, a seemingly straightforward act of survival and progress, unintentionally armed microbes with the opportunity to evolve into new threats. History is littered with moments when microbes turn the tide of human events. The book retells the devastation wrought by smallpox in the Americas after Europeans arrived. To indigenous populations with no prior exposure, smallpox was apocalyptic. Entire societies collapsed under its weight. The Spanish conquest of the Aztecs and the Incas owed as much to microbes as to swords. While European armies were formidable, their deadliest weapon was invisible. Native populations who had never encountered Old World pathogens lacked immunity and mortality rates soared. In some communities, up to 90% perished. Crawford emphasizes the tragic irony that colonization succeeded not merely through human ambition, but through microbial conquest. Smallpox, measles, and other imported diseases reshaped the Americas far more decisively than any individual conquistador. Europe, however, was no stranger to microbial devastation itself. The most famous episode, of course, was the Black Death of the 14th century, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas, and spread through rats. Crawford vividly recounts how the plague decimated Europe's population, killing perhaps a third to half of its people in just a few years. The terror it caused went beyond the deaths themselves. Entire villages were abandoned, trade routes disrupted, and faith shaken. The psychological scar was deep, inspiring art, literature, and religious movements obsessed with mortality. Yet, paradoxically, Crawford notes, the aftermath of the plague also had long-term social and economic consequences that shaped Europe's future. With so many dead, labor became scarce, forcing feudal lords to grant peasants more freedom and wages, thereby weakening feudalism. Microbes, then, had not only destroyed lives, but inadvertently helped dismantle an old social order. Crawford devotes significant attention to the dynamic between microbes and war. Armies, with their crowded camps, poor hygiene, and constant movement, have always been fertile grounds for disease. In many wars, microbes killed more soldiers than combat did. She recounts how typhus ravaged Napoleon's army during the disastrous Russian campaign. Cold and starvation played their part, but the lice-borne bacterium that caused typhus ensured that his grand army crumbled not under Russian fire, but under microbial assault. Similarly, dysentery plagued soldiers throughout history, from medieval campaigns to the trenches of World War I. Disease and war are inseparable companions, Crawford argues, because wherever humans gather in stress and hardship, microbes follow. One of the book's more unsettling themes is how microbes exploit human progress. The rise of trade networks, for instance, spread pathogens far beyond their places of origin. The Silk Road carried not only silk and spices, but also germs. The age of exploration connected continents, and with it came pandemics that reshaped populations. In the 20th century, air travel compressed geography even further, making it possible for diseases to leap continents in hours. SARS, influenza, and later Ebola outbreaks all demonstrated how globalization gives microbes unprecedented mobility. What we see as triumphs of human ingenuity, trade, travel, interconnectedness, are also opportunities for microbes to thrive. Crawford doesn't just dwell on past calamities. She also charts how science gradually began to understand and counter microbes. For centuries, disease was poorly understood. Explanations range from miasmas, bad air, to divine punishment. Treatments were often ineffective or harmful. The breakthrough came with the germ theory of disease, pioneered by figures like Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch in the 19th century. Once microbes were identified as the culprits, medicine gained the ability to fight back with sanitation, vaccines, and later antibiotics. The smallpox vaccine, developed from Jenner's insight that cowpox could protect against smallpox, stands as one of the greatest triumphs of science, eventually eradicating the disease worldwide by the late 20th century. Crawford recounts how this eradication was a monumental achievement of global cooperation, proving that humanity could, at least in some cases, turn the tide against its microbial adversaries. Yet victory has been incomplete. Crawford carefully warns that microbes are endlessly adaptable. Antibiotics, hailed as miracle drugs when first discovered, quickly lost their omnipotence as bacteria evolved resistance. She describes how misuse of antibiotics, in both medicine and agriculture, accelerates the rise of resistant strains, threatening to undo decades of medical progress. Tuberculosis, once seemingly under control, resurged in drug-resistant forms. Hospital superbugs like MRSA became notorious. The message is sobering. Microbes evolve far faster than humans, and our medical arsenal must continually innovate or risk obsolescence. Another chapter of this story is the emergence of entirely new diseases. Crawford highlights HIV/AIDS, as the quintessential example of a modern pandemic. Emerging in the late 20th century, HIV crossed into humans from primates, likely through bushmeat practices in Africa. From there, global travel and social factors allowed it to spread worldwide. Unlike smallpox or plague, HIV is insidious because it attacks the very immune system meant to protect us, turning the body's defenses against itself. The devastation it caused, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, was staggering. Yet HIV also galvanized global research and activism, leading to unprecedented efforts to develop treatments, which, though not a cure, transformed HIV from a death sentence into a manageable chronic disease in many parts of the world. Crawford uses HIV as a reminder that new microbes are always waiting to emerge, and human behavior often provides the pathways for them. The relationship between humans and microbes is not always antagonistic. Crawford points out that sometimes exposure to microbes shapes our immunity in beneficial ways. The hygiene hypothesis suggests that growing up in overly sterile environments may predispose people to allergies or autoimmune diseases because the immune system fails to learn proper balance without enough microbial training. In this way, our deadly companions are also our teachers, sculpting the immune system that guards us. We are not separate from the microbial world, but deeply enmeshed within it. Crawford also underscores the irony that many deadly microbes are not trying to kill us. In evolutionary terms, it is not advantageous for a pathogen to wipe out its host too quickly because that reduces its chances of spreading. Diseases like the common cold are highly successful precisely because they are mild, allowing hosts to continue socializing and transmitting the virus. In contrast, pathogens like Ebola, with high lethality, often burn themselves out because they kill victims before widespread transmission can occur. Smallpox and plague sit somewhere in between, deadly enough to cause devastation, yet still able to spread before killing. The evolutionary dance between microbes and humans is thus about balance, with each side adapting to the other. By the end of the book, Crawford circles back to her central metaphor. Microbes are our companions, not outsiders. They have shaped our history, from the fall of empires to the rise of modern medicine. They continue to shape us biologically, culturally, and politically. And the story is far from over. New pathogens will emerge, old ones will adapt, and humanity will remain in constant dialogue with the microbial world. Crawford's narrative is not one of despair, but of humility. We cannot imagine ourselves as separate masters of nature. We are part of an ecosystem where microbes have as much claim to survival as we do. Her storytelling is peppered with vivid anecdotes and examples. She recounts the horrific symptoms of smallpox, the swollen buboes of plague, the fevers of malaria, but also the ingenuity of scientists like Jenner, Pasteur, and Fleming who fought back. She blends epidemiology with human history, making clear that microbes are not abstract scientific curiosities, but forces that have sculpted the destiny of nations. In reading her book, one cannot help but see history differently. Wars, migrations, and social revolutions appear not merely as human choices, but as co-productions of humans and microbes. Every cough, every flea bite, every contaminated well is part of a story far grander than individual actors. In the final analysis, Deadly Companions is a call to awareness. It reminds us that we live in partnership with microbes, sometimes beneficial, sometimes deadly, but always present. It is also a call to vigilance. Our scientific advances give us tools, but complacency can be fatal. Microbes do not rest, and neither can we. And yet, Crawford's narrative is not simply cautionary. It is also a story of resilience. Humans, despite countless plagues and pandemics, have survived, adapted, and even thrived. Our history is written in microbial ink, but so is our capacity for ingenuity and cooperation. The microbes shaped us, but we also, in responding to them, shaped the modern world. In closing, Crawford leaves the reader with a paradoxical sense of gratitude and fear. Gratitude, because without microbes, we would not be who we are, our immune systems would not be trained, our guts would not digest, our very lives would not be possible. Fear, because within the microbial world lies constant potential for devastation, always reminding us of our vulnerability. But perhaps the truest lesson of Deadly Companions is not fear at all. It is perspective. To see humanity as inseparable from microbes is to understand that our story is not just ours. It is a shared story, microscopic and grand at once, in which every sneeze, every mutation, every voyage across the sea is another verse in an endless saga of survival and adaptation. And that's it. Deadly Companions: How Microbes Shaped Our History by Dorothy Crawford. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.